Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session looking at Christ's Passion by I'm not is it George Sandys or Sandys, or is it just Sands? I wonder. It's Sandys, and I'm not really sure how you're supposed to say his name. It's a translation of a text. It is purportedly a drama. It's an interesting question how dramatic it really is. That's one of these questions that we're going to be doing on this sort of flyby first look exploring session. We're not going to stop and start to discuss this very much. We will largely just let the text fly by because it's mostly long speeches, and we're going to see whether long speeches are not the end of the world in terms of drama, but there isn't a lot of people talking to each other. So it'll be interesting to see how this text flows in this translation. It's generally dated 1640. There is a note on the printing of September 17th. 1639. I'm not quite sure whether that has anything to do with the text itself, or is that some strange artifact? Because I say the note I have is for 1640. It's only a few months out. 1640 doesn't start that late after that, so who knows? But anyway, we will find out with these wonderful readings that we're doing today, with reading Jesus as well as First Nuncius and Mary is.
Hello, my name's Francis Cox. I'm an actor and voice artist living in Amsterdam.
Reading Caiaphas, Second Nuncius, and John is.
Hi, I'm Eric, and I've got some technical issues with my coffee.
Reading Peter, Judas, and Roman soldiers is.
Alan in Suffolk.
Reading a chorus of Jewish women, various Jews, and Joseph of Arimathea is.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm coming to you from the northwestern United States.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I will be reading, I would say reading stage directions. There aren't really any stage directions. I'll note when the acts change. And I'll be reading, however, Pontius Pilate and Nicodemus. Usual potential content warning, of course. This is a pseudo mystery play dealing with biblical matters with lots of characters down as Jews. I'm suspecting that we might have the risk of some anti-Semitism here, or anti-Jewish sentiment. So I don't know that there is going to be such a thing, but there's some form on that in the text that we do. So just be aware of that. Where we go with that caveat in place, we will start Act 1, Scene 1. Enter Jesus.
O thou who governest what thou didst create with equal sway, great arbiter of fate, the world's almighty Father, I thy Son, though born in time, before his course begun. Thus far my deeds have answered thy commands. If more remain, my zeal prepared stands to execute thy charge. All that I fear, all that I hate, I shall with patience bear. No misery refuse, no toil nor shame. I know for this into the world I came. And yet, how long shall I these extremes endure? What day or night have known my life secure? My burden, my enduring heavier grows, and present ills away to worse disclose. My kingdom, heaven, I left to visit earth, and suffered banishment before my birth. An unknown infant, in a stable born, lodged in a manger, little poor forlorn, and miserable, though so vile a thing, yet worthy of the envy of a king. 2 years scarce, yet complete, too old was thought by Herod's fears, while I alone was sought. The bloody sword Ephraim dames deprives of their dear babes, through wounds they exhaled their lives. Secured by flying to a foreign clime, the tyrant through his error lost his crime. 1,000 miracles have made me known through all the world, and my extraction shown. Envy against my raves, yet virtue hath more storms of mischief raised than Herod's wrath. It is decreed by thy unchanging will, I should be acknowledged and rejected still. The inspired Magi from the Orient came, preferred my star before their Mithras flame, and at my infant feet devoutly fell. But Abraham's seed, the house of Israel, to these sequestered from eternity, degenerate and ingrate, their God deny. Behold the contumacious Pharisees, armed with dissembled zeal against my rise. The bloody priests to their stern party draw, the doctors of their unobserved law, and impious Sadducees to perpetrate my intended overthrow, incense the state. What rests to quicken faith? Even at my nod, nature submits, acknowledging her God. The Galilean youth drink the pure blood of generous grapes drawn from the neighbor flood. I others, famine cured, subdued my own. Life-strengthening food for 40 days unknown, twixt the dispenser's hands the admired bread increased, great multitudes of people fed, yet more than all remained. The winds assuage their storms, and threatening billows calm their rage. The hardened waves unsinking feet endure, and pale diseases which despise their cure, my voice subdues. Long darkness chased away, to me the blind by birth now owes his day, and he hears who never yet was heard, now speaks, and in my praises first his silence breaks, those damned spirits of infernal night, rebels to God and to the sons of light. Inveterate foes, my voice but heard forsake, the long possessed and struck with terror quake. Nor was't enough for Christ such wonders done, to profit those alone who seized the sun. To vanquish death, my powerful hands invades his silent regions and inferior shades. The stars, the earth, the seas, my triumphs know. What rests to conquer but the depths below? Through opening sepulchres, night's gloomy caves, the violated privilege of graves, I sent my dread commands. A heat newborn reanimates the dead from funerals torn, and death the numb cold expulsed, enforced away for souls departed to review the day. The ashes from their ransacked tombs received a second life, and by my bounty breathe. But death, his late free empire thus restrained, not used to restore his spoils, complained that I should thus unweave the web of fate, decrease his subjects, and subvert his state. I, for so many ransomed from death, must to his anger sacrifice my breath. And now that horrid hour is almost come, when sinful mortals shall their Maker doom, when I, the world's great Lord, who life on all mankind bestowed, must by their fury fall. That tragic time to my last period hastes, and night, who now on all her shadows casts, while with the motion of the heavens she flies. This short delay of my sad life envies fate, be less stern in thy intended course, nor drag him who will follow without force. After so many miseries endured, cold, heat, thirst, famine, eyes to tears inured, and yet worst of ills draws near, their breath, for whom I suffer, must procure my death. The innocent made guilty by the foul defects of others must his weary soul sigh into air, and though of heavenly birth, with his chaste blood disdain the ungrateful earth. They traffic for my soul, my death, long sought, is by the mitred merchants faction bought, and treason finds reward, my travels draw near their last end. These practices I saw, see what this night's confederate shadows hide, my mind before my body crucified. Horror shakes all my powers, my entrails beat, and all my body flows with purple sweat. Oh, whither is my ancient courage fled, and godlike strength by anguish captive led? O death, how far more cruel in thy kind! The anxiety and torment of the mind, then must I be of all at once bereft? Or is there any hope of safety left? O might I to my heavenly Father pray, so supple to my tears to take away part of these ills, but his eternal doom forbids, and ordered course of things to come, his purpose fixed when yet the world was young, and oracles so oft by the prophets sung, now rushing on their destinated end. No orisons nor sacrifice can bend. Why stay I with triumphant feet to tread upon the infernal serpent's poisonous head, and break the old dragon's jaws? The sin of our first parents must be cleansed with a shower of blood, rain from my wounds, my death appease, and cure the venom of that dire disease. All you who live, rejoice. All you who die, you sacred ashes of the just which lie in peaceful urns, rejoice in this my fall. I for the living lived, but die for all. My sufferings are not lost. To earth I owe these promised ills, bonds, whips, and thorns to grow about my bleeding brows. The cross, the scorn of a proud people, to destruction born. Oh, let my Father's wrath through singed air on me in thunder dart, so mine it spare, lest the world should, I perish, and must bear the punishments of all that ever were. You who inhabit where the sun displays his early light, or near his setting rays, who suffer by his perpendicular aspect, or freeze beneath the northern star, effect this ready sacrifice, who am a greater offering than the paschal lamb. My precious blood alone the virtue hath to purge your sins and quench my Father's wrath. Now the full moon succeeds that vernal light, which usually divides the day and night, sacred to feasts. The next sun shall survey one brighter than himself, and lose his day. False traitor, through thy guilt so timorous grown, although thou leadst an army against one, shrouded in night, I am not taken by thy guile, but know thy fraud, and haste to die. But you, my chosen friends, who yet preserve your faith entire, nor from your duty swerve, your festival, our washings past, rehearse your Maker's excellence in sacred verse, while I to those frequented shades repair where the trees answer to the sighing air. Learn as we walk along unto what place I shortly shall return. What heavenly grace is to descend upon you from above? What are the laws of charity and love, while my last prayers solicit heaven? To sleep, give no access. This night my vigil keep.
And we go into the chorus at the end of Act 1, into Act 1, Scene 2.
The rapid motion of the spheres old night from our horizon bears, and now declining shades give way to the return of cheerful day. But Phosphorus, who leads the stars and day's illustrious path prepares, who last of all the host retires, not yet withdraws those radiant fires, nor have our trumpets summoned the morning from her dewy bed. And yet her roses are unblown, nor by her purple mantle known. All night we in the temple keep, not yielding to the charms of sleep, so we might with zealous prayer our thoughts and cleansed hearts prepare to celebrate the ensuing light, when Phoebe shall her horns unite. This annual feast to memory is sacred, nor with us must die. Thus by that dreadful exul taught, when God his plagues on Egypt brought, those cities, these our rights bereave, of citizens and widows leave, where Jordan from two bubbling heads his oft returning waters leads, till they their narrow bounds forsake, and grow a sea resembling lake. Those woods of palm producing dates of fragrant balsamum, which hates the touch of steel, where once the sound of trumpets leveled with the ground unbattered walls, the mount the mount which shrouds his airy head in hanging clouds, where death closed our prophets' eyes, admired to see their colonies ascend the hills of Solima in celebration of this day. Siphaeans, whose strong walls withstood the ruins of the general flood, to solemnize this day, forsake adored Dercetis and her lake. Hither the Palestines from strong Osotus, both the Jamnes throng. Not Lydda could her own restrain, nor Caparos's walls contain her Edomites. Damascus could not hers, though she 10 nations ruled. Nor yet Sebaste, long the nurse of impious sons, sprung from our source, Phoenicians, who did first produce to mortal letters with their use, where Tyrus full of luxury, with mother Sidon from the sky, hither with hasty zeal repair. Among the Syrians, those who dare feed on forbidden fish, no more the deity of dove adore. From Belus, whose waters pass on glittering sands, which turn to glass, from Arnon's banks, those borders are the subject of our ancient wars, whose sulphurous bitumen take from salt asphaltus deadly lake. No tempest on the sea prevails, no ship upon her bosom sails, unmoved with oars. What overflies, struck by her breath, falls down and dies. Hates all that lives. In her profound, none are received, but flower undrowned. No seas, but slimy shores embraced, so pestilent a vapor cast. This blast the corn before it bears, and poisons the declining ears. Sad autumn's fruits to cinders turn, and all the fields in ashes mourn. Lest time should waste the memory of those revengeful flames, the sky on earth in melting sulphur showered, which that accursed race devoured. When she, who did commiserate with impious grief her city's fate, grew, in the moment of her fault, a statue of congealed salt. Hither devout Esseans fly, who without issue multiply, and virtue only propagate. All sensual loves, all lucre hate, and equal poverty embrace. Thrice happy of a noble race, who slight your own particular, transported with the public care. He flies a pitch above our woes, or crimes, who gladly undergoes their toil and want, nor would possess what others miscall happiness. What numbers from the sun's uprise, from where he leaves the morning skies of our dispersed Abrahamites, this vesper to their homes invites. Yet we, in yearly triumph still, a lamb for our deliverance kill, since liberty our confines fled, gives with the first unleavened bread. She never would return, though bought with wounds in destruction sought. Some stray to Libya's scorched sands, where horned Hammon's temple stands, to Nilus some where Philip's son, who all the rifled Orient won, built his proud city. Others gone to their old prison, Babylon. Apart to freezing Taurus fled, and Tiber, now the ocean's head, our ruins all the world have filled. But you, by use and suffering skilled, forgetting in remoter climes our vanished glory, nor those times, those happy times, compare with these. Your burdens may support with ease. More justly we of fate complain, whose servitude at home sustain. We to perpetual woes designed, in our own country Egypt find.
And we go to Act 2, Scene 1, and Peter.
You offspring of bloodthirsty Romulus, foes to sweet peace and to our great God and us, and you, profaner sacrificers, who with subtle mischief guiltless blood pursue, since you would not refuse to bind the hands innocents, on me impose your bans. Seize on the guilty, he who hath refused his lord and master by himself accused. The ills yet suffered I deserve to bear for looking on. What follows for my fear? You need no torches to subdue the night's dark shades to find me, no stern satellites drawn from the temple, nor with Romans join to act one sin, nor spend your sacred coin in salary to such a guide as may, with a perfidious kiss, his lord betray. His head I give you freely, hither haste, no sudden whirlwind shall your bodies cast on trembling earth. Behold, I with my hands behind me bound implore your dire commands, and run to meet your stripes. Are you now prone to melting pity? Will you punish none? But with injustice is your fury slow, unless to those who no offences know? We both alike have impiously transgressed, you in not punishing a fault confessed, and I, who have the living Lord denied, just judges for life so sanctified, to whom suborned witnesses have sold their damned perjuries. A wretch, behold, and here is crime, my country Galilee. To follow Christ I left both land and sea, son to the thunderer, his only heir, from heaven sent by his father to repair and rule the affairs of mortals. This is he whom you have bound, who must his country free. Rebellious vassals, you have doomed your king. I know the impious race from whence you spring, your savage manners, cruel ancestors, whom nature as her greatest curse abhors. Such, when the trembling boy his brethren's hands, their truculent aspects and servile bands beheld, though privy to a better fate, whose providence was to reward their hate, soon after, called to Nile's seven-channeled flood, he famine from both lands expelled with food. So your seditious fathers mutinied at sinners' rocks against their sacred head, and there the food of angels loathed, which fell from heaven in showers, besotted Israel, Egypt, and servitude preferred above the tents of Moses and their country's love. What numbers, with prophetic raptures filled, have you, and yet not unrevenged, killed? Memphis, devouring deserts, civil wars, oft foreign yokes, Assyrian conquerors, great Pompey's eagles, sacred rites profaned, your temple sacked, with slaughtered Levites stained. All forgot, yet worse attend your hate. Oh, that I were minister of fate! I then would tear your guilty buildings down, and in a crimson sea their ruins drown. Witness you groves, late conscious to your cares, where Christ with tears poured forth his funeral prayers. How I revenge pursued, and with their blood would have augmented Cedron's murmuring flood. But he, for whom I struck, reproved the blow, and following his own precept, cured his foe. But Malchus, rushing on in front of all, pursuing part of his without him fall, searched with his flaming brand the bleeding ear. See, on the ground, revenge subdued his fear, who loudly roaring shook his threatened bands, and straight encountered all those all-healing hands. Then they to his head that ornament restored, and benefits for injuries afford. But ho, blind mischief, I who gave the wound am left at large, and he who healed it found. Oh, Peter, canst thou yet forbear to throw thy body on the weapons of the foe? If thou wouldst vindicate thy Lord, begin first with thyself, and punish thine own sin. Thou that darest menace armies, thou that art fierce as a Median tiger, of a heart invincible, not knows what 'tis to dread, with fortune at the first encounter fled. Fugitive, a rebel, one that hath all crimes committed in this breach of faith, who towering hopes on his own strength erects, nor the self-flattering mind's deceit suspects, but his vain virtue trust. Let him in me the sad example of his frailty see. From slippery heights, how pronely mortals slide, their heady errors punishing their pride. What can I add to these misdeeds of mine, who have defiled the water, bread, and wine with my abhorred defection? Oh, could I those lips pollute with wilful perjury, but newly feasted with that sacred food, presenting his torn flesh and poured out blood? Oh, piety, for this, thou renegade, did Jesus wash thy flying feet of late? Not Jordan with two heads, whose waters roll from snow-top Libanus, can cleanse thy soul. Not thou, Kilare, nor that ample lake, from whose forsaken shore my birth I take. Couldst thou, blue Nereus, in whose troubled deep Nile's 7 loud mouths their foaming currents steep, or that Red Sea, whose waves in rampires stood, while our forefathers passed the parted flood? These purging streams from thy own springs must flow. Repentance, why are thy complaints so slow? Raise storms of sighs, let tears in torrents fall, and on thy blushing cheeks deep furrows cool. So, run freely, beat thy stubborn breast. Here spend thy rage, these blows become thee best. This, wretched Caiaphas, for thy crimes I owe. What can I for my injured Lord bestow? My deeds and sufferings disproportioned are, nor must they in any sorrow share. Should this night ever last, to propagate increasing sorrows till subdued by fate, my penitent soul this wasted flesh forsake, yet can my guilt no reparation make? Swollen eyes, now weep you, then you should have wept, besprinkled my devotion, and have kept that holy watch, when interdicted sleep your drowsy lids did in his lethe steep. You should have dropped my brains into a flood, before he that at that dire tribunal stood. Ere thrice subdued, on me his looks he threw, or ere the accusing bird of dawning drew. Where shall I hide me? In what dungeon may my troubled soul avoid the woeful day? Fly quickly to some melancholy cave, and in dark entrails thou mayst find a grave, to bury thee alive, ere waste thy years in cherished sorrow and unwitnessed tears.
And Act 2, Scene 2, Pontius Pilate and Caiaphas. Tarpeian Jove, Mars, great Quirinus sire, you household gods snatched from Troy's funeral fire, with greater zeal adored, when shall I pay my vows, my offerings on your altars lay? And see those roofs which top the clouds, the beams with burnished gold enchased and blazing gems, those theatres which ring with their applause, on who on the conquered world impose their laws, and thee, the triple earth's imperious guide, great-souled Tiberius, whether thou reside on Tiber's banks, adored by grateful Rome, ambitious of his residence, for whom she gave the world, or Capri, which much renowned for soft delights impoverished the long-gowned, far from thy friends, far from my native soil, I here in honourable exile toil, to curb a people whom the gods disclaim, who cover under the usurped name of piety their hate to all mankind, condemn the world in their own vices blind, and with false grounded fear abjure for one all those immortals which the heavens enthrone. Their only law is to renounce all laws. Their error, which from other hatred draws, fomenting their own discord, still provokes their spirits to rebellion, who their yokes have oft attempted to shake off, though they more easily are subdued than ought to obey. Clear justice, sincere faith, bear witness you with how much grief our swords the Hebrews slew, but such as stubborn and inhumane are, unless they suffer, would enforce a war, and reason urgeth those whose sceptres bear against their nature oft to prove severe. I go to question what these prelates would, since they forbear to enter, lest they should, their feast so near, with my unhallowed floor their feet pollute. Who's this, by such a power, in shackles led? How reverend his aspect! How full of awe! These looks no guilt detect. Thou, Caiaphas, the Solyma the prime, and prince of priests, relate the imputed crime.
Great guardian of Rome, of the Roman peace, whom we, next to Caesar, honor, to be doomed by thee, our senate brings the infection of these times, whom we accuse of no suggested crimes. Those holy rites which grave antiquity first introduced, since defended by a long descent, this innovator sought to abolish, and a new religion taught, nor fearing the recess of God's own seat. The temple's ruin sings, and roof replete with the full deity, disturbs the feast of the seventh day, designed for sacred rest. Those laws rejects which Moses' pen revealed, even those by God with dreadful thunder sealed, nor so content with heaven his fury wars, aspires that throne and tramples on the stars, who styles himself, though of ignoble birth, his only son, who made both heaven and earth. This death must expiate. He hath judged his cause, who'd writ in leaves of marble our 10 laws.
Then wrath, the nurse of war, and thirst of gold, destructive arts produce, the better sold, no peace nor safety found, enforced to bear, life of itself infirm, through common fear, into societies the scattered drew, who by united forces potent grew, entrenched cities with high walls immured, but more by well-digested laws secured. The crime and punishment proportion kept, and wrongs like wolves on their first authors leapt. Justice from each offence example took, and his own weapon the delinquent strook. Spoil seized on rapine, blood drew blood, deterred from doing that which they to suffer feared. But more than human plagues attend on those who God provoke. He prosecute his foes with sure revenge. Why should those hands which tear the clouds with thunder, shake the world with fear, their wrath to man resign? The impious find their scourge. The terror of the astonished mind affrights their peace, who feel what they deny, and fear an unbelieved deity. One day no period to his torment gives, to tremble at the name of death he lives, still apprehending what than death is worse, long life awarded to prolong his curse. But if he have your laws infringed, be you yourselves the judge, and his guilt pursue.
Although those ancient laws which now remain among us we acknowledge to retain from Rome's free bounty, yet to you 'tis known our curbed power can death inflict on none. You, to whom Caesar's fortunes recommend, his rods and axes sacred rule defend, this guilty wretch, whose practices we fear, of late his place of birth forsaking, where the sea is honored with Tiberius' name, with troops of clients to this city came, who seized of war among the vulgar sows or sows? Sows?
Sows.
Yeah, it rhymes with impose. Okay. With what injustice Roman arms impose, their tribute on a nation ever free. With magic charms and Stygian compact, he attracts belief, denies the dead their rest of those unenvied mansions dispossessed by wicked spells. These prodigies delude the novelty affecting multitude, whom for their lord their loud hosannas greet, and strew the noble palm beneath his feet. Emboldened by these arts, he, as his own by birth, aspires to David's ancient throne. When Rome, provoked by his rebellion, shall arm her just grief, we by the sword must fall. Our cities sink in flames, our country lie depopulated. But since one must die to save the general, sentenced by thy breath, let him redeem his nation with his death.
Such doubtful causes grave advice require. Here, if you please, attend while I retire. The prisoner to the soldiers commit care commit, on whom this day we will in judgment sit. And presumably they exit as we go into the chorus of Jewish women, Fact 2, Scene 3.
You lofty towers of Solima, thou ancient throne of sovereign sway, to thee the conquered tribute paid, from the isthmus covered with ebon shade, to great Euphrates, trembling streams, Arabians scorched by Phoebus beams, the admiring queen, winged by thy fame, from her black-peopled empire came. Great kings, ambitious of thy love, to join with thee in friendship strove. Those who Canopus' scepter bore, those monarchs who the sun adore, and o'er the wealthy Orient reign, Serana, sovereign of the main, now, a miserable thrall, and nothing but a prey to all. This land, the one God once chastely wed, how often hath she changed her head, since they our temples ruined pride with bad presage re-edified. Since those in foreign bondage born did with their servile fates return. On us Antiochus' guilt reflects, our fathers' sins sit on our necks. What durst that wicked age not do, which could those altars naked view, oft flaming with celestial fire, provoking heaven's deserved ire with their adulterate sacrifice? For this did ours so highly prize the Ionian gods, by mortals made, and incense to those idols paid. Since when the accursed their brothers slew, wives less malicious poison brew, sons fall by mothers. We have known that which will be believed by none. Twice vanquished by Roman arms, twice have their conquerors our harms removed for greater. Fortune's change to our proud masters proved as strange. Yet this no less our grief provokes. Our kindred bear divided yokes. One part by Roman bondage wrung, the other by two brothers, sprung from savage Idumeans, whom our fathers have so oft o'ercome. O thou, the hope, the only one of our distress, and ruin throne, of whom with a prophetic tongue to Judah dying Jacob sung, the crowned muse on ivory lyre, her breast inflamed with holy fire, this oft foretold, that thou shouldst free the people consecrate to thee, that thou, triumphing, should revoke sweet peace, then never to be broke, when freed Judea should obey one Lord and all affect his sway. Oh, when shall we behold thy face, so often promised to our race? If prophets who have won belief by our mishaps and flowing grief of joyful change as truly sung, thy absence should not now be long. Thee by thy virtue we entreat, the temple's veil, the mercy seat, that name which by our fathers swear, which in our vulgar speech we dare not utter, too compassionate thy kindred tears and ruined state, hast to our great redemption, hast to our most holy Lord, and at last blessed with thy presence, that we may to thee our vows devoutly pay.
And thus ends Act 2. And we will pause there briefly just to take in what this text is doing. I think we've got a fairly good idea. It is semi-dramatic in the sense that certainly during the Pontius Pilate scene, not only do two people actually talk to each other, but also there are other people in the room around the action happening. So Jesus is brought in halfway through with Caiaphas. And generally when characters are talking, there is a bit of momentum and also a bit of emotion. I thought that obviously Jesus is functioning more as a prologue, and obviously there is emotion there. But I thought actually the Peter was there was a sense of him coming on just furious about the injustice of everything, and that sort of drove it forward and was really good. And then we hit the chorus and it dies a death. I mean, the chorus is... I'm not a fan... Okay, I'm just going to put my... I am not a fan of choruses in general, but this is not a good chorus. I'll go to Alan then, Lynn.
Yeah, I must admit, I did find that there were some bits where you could actually get some emotion into the Peter stuff. But the whole thing, because it's in this rhyming couplet form, it is a bit one note. It's a bit dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum. Dum-de-dum-de-dum.
Yeah.
You know, a bit Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, and I mean, you can, with rehearsal, you can make that work, and you can get round that, and you can... I think the thing is to play with the rhythm more and not get too trapped in that, being aware of the trap. But it is very regular, so there is a sense of maybe to save this for a live performance, one has to kill the verse slightly and damage it just to break it up slightly, so that you've got something different going on. That might be an option, because as I say, there is potential here, and we've done narrative poems before, so and that's sort of where this is. It's somewhere between. It's a semi-dramatic, but it's not doing the full drama thing. Lynn?
Yeah, just to agree with what you've said, Rob, about the verse actually as well, that you need to kind of break it up. You kind of have to ignore the verse in order to make it listenable. And reading the chorus has pretty much stopped my will to live. So
well, I tell you what, would you like to read Nicodemus, and I'll take the choruses from now on?
No, it's okay. We will stick with as a science to make it less confusing. But the lines are a little shorter. You might not be aware of that just listening to it, but like the verse lines are slightly shorter, so it feels super repetitive, and the syntax is really hard to parse. I don't know what I'm saying like 80% of the time.
Well, I mean, it's the content of what the chorus is saying as well, because it's sort of diving into biblical precedent and a list of different peoples, and the names of the peoples are not necessarily the versions we generally use, and so it's so obscure that you're sitting there going, and that's assuming that there aren't typos and you're just saying something that is just gobbledygook. It makes it very difficult to follow any of that. I'll go to Francis, then Eric, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm with Lynn. When I was reading that long speech of Jesus's, there were some parts of it which were really clear, and I knew what was going on because, of course, it's the story which we all know. But then I come on a bit and think, what the hell's going on now? But I think Lynn had a much tougher job with those choruses speech. So kudos to you, Lynn. I mean, it's that tough stuff to read. And one other thing, some of the rhyming couplets are really bad.
Yes, and I think also a lot of the rhyming couplets we may encounter more than once. I suspect there are a finite number of times they can not end up repeating. Eric.
I mean, I think it's like I can see where it's going and stuff, like what what it's doing and how it's functioning, but it's just kind of like, for example, Caiaphas trying to describe where Nazareth is was quite entertaining, because it's like, instead of just saying, he was born here, or like pointing to a map, he just kind of goes, yeah, he was born where the sea is honored with Tiberius' name, and it's like, you could just call it the Tiber, or so something like that. It's just not as, it's a very roundabout way of saying one thing.
Yes, I think, to be fair, a lot of poetry has been accused of that kind of obscuration. I think just on the note I said at the beginning about the nature of the anti-Jewish sentiment in this as well, is that's sort of what Pontius Pilate is doing at the beginning as well. Is he's basically doing the stuff of, this is what the Jews are like, them and their one God, and I mean, to play devil's advocate for a moment, that is not necessarily unlike the kind of sentiment a Roman might have had, actually. I mean, they were in many ways more open at that point to other faiths and religions, but that didn't mean to say they found the idea of one God very weird, and that doesn't mean to say they weren't fans by any stretch of the imagination. So, in a sense, there's a slight historicity, but there's also just a case of going, ooh, later Christians being really quite shitty ness to it all. Alan, very briefly, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, quick one. I think part of the reason for the mangled syntax is straining to get the rhymes, and that means the word order is sometimes not good. And again, because we're doing this as a cold read, you haven't actually got the opportunity really to look ahead and work out what the sense is of what you're saying. It's one word follows another.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's do some more of that word running into itself. Act 3, Scene 1, we have Judas and Caiaphas.
You who preserve your pure integrity, O you whose crimes transcend not credit fly, far from my presence, whose envenomed sight pollutes the guilty, thou who wrong and right distinctly canst discern, whose gentle breast all faith hath not abandoned, but are blessed with children, brothers, friends, nor hast declined the sweet affections of a pious mind. Shut up the winding entry of thine ear, nor let the world of such a bargain hear. A sin so horrible should be to none besides the desperate contractors known. Where now the mitre chief? Where that dire train of sacrifices worthy to be slain on their own altars? I found my cure. I found my curse. The Son, accepting myself, sees nothing worse. Here, without hire, oh here, the too well known. If you seek a witness, I am one that can the truth reveal. Or would you find a villain? Here's a self-accusing mind, that sacred life, O most immaculate, more than my masters, to your deadly hate have I betrayed. Discharge my hands I may, though not of the guilt, yet of the prey. Receive the gift you gave, a treachery second to mine, you may of others buy.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. If thou accuse thyself of such a sin deservedly, thou hast a court within that will condemn thee. Thy offences be no crimes of ours, our consciences are free, nor shall the sacred treasury receive the price of blood. Thee to thy fate we leave.
Is this the doctrine of your piety, to approve the crime, yet hate the hire? Fly, wretch, unto the altar, and pollute the temple with thy sin's accursed fruit. Nor will I for myself, with hopeless prayer, solicit heaven, lost in my own despair. God's stern justice urge that we who were joined in the guilt may equal vengeance bear. Nor shall I in my punishment prove slow. Behold, your leader will, before you go, 'tis fit you follow to those silent deeps, those horrid shades where sorrow never sleeps. Thou great director of the ruling stars, unless thou icily look on men's affairs, vainly we thy brutish thunder fear. Why should thy land so dire a monster bear, or the sun not retire? And yet behold, those thy fearful punishments of old require belief in one, unite them all. Let seas in cataracts from meteors fall, ford no shore, but swallow in their brine, so that the world's first ruin may prove mine. Let melting stars their sulphurous surfeit shed, and all the heavenly fires fall on my head. And thou, O injured earth, thy jaws extend, that I may to the infernal shades descend. Less cause had thy revenge, when she, the 5 enraged conspirators devoured alive, whose evil which amazed the former times, thy fury hath consumed on smaller crimes. O slow revengers of his injuries, and he thy son, some fearful death devise. Prayed. Or shall I pursue mine own offence, and act what thou shouldst do? You legion of heaven's exiles, you who take revenge on mortals for the crimes you make, why troop you thus about me? Or what need these terrors? Is my punishment decreed in hell already? Furies, now I come in your dark dungeons. What more horrid Rome shall now devour me? Must I to that place where the cursed father of a wicked race your scourge feels, who, when the world was new and but possessed by 4, his brother slew? Or where the faithless prince blasphemes, then all his host more eminent, who lest his fall should honour to his enemies afford, made way for hated life with his own sword. He most affects me, who in his father's share usurped, when caught by his revenging hair. He lost the earth and life, the way he led, to avoided death my willing feet shall tread. Master, I fly in to anticipate the event, my fell crime with equal punishment.
And we can infer his exit. Act 3, Scene 2, enter Pontius Pilate and the Jews. Horror distracts my sense, irresolute whether I should break silence or sit mute. Envy the accused condemned, whom justice clears. I must confess, persuaded by my fears, lest I this state and people should incense, I wish they could have proved that great offence. Yet whatsoever they enforced of late, no fault of his revealed, but their own hate. His silence was a vanquishing reply, who for detecting their false piety, those supercilious looks that with fasting pale, close avarice and proud ambition veil, is by their arts made guilty, one that slights the God they adore and violates his rights. From hence those many named offences spring, at his aspiring to become their king. Can those poor fishers in that of that inland sea, and women following him from Galilee, so great a spirit in their leader raise, that Rome should fear whom all the world obeys? Yet he avers his kingdom is unknown, nor of this world, and bows to Caesar's throne. Proved by the event, for when the vulgar bound his yielding hands, they no resistance found. But his endowments, zealous in defence of clouded truth, their mortal hate incensed. Followed by few who like affections bear, and with belief their master's doctrine hear. If true, he may speak freely, nor must die for ostentation, though he broach a lie. But if distracted, that's a punishment even to itself, and justice doth prevent. He whom this annual solemnity have now invited to the temple by his father built, whose kingdom borders on the land ennobled by Agenor's throne, of these stupendous acts by rumour spread, could fix no faith, though in his city bred, to laughter doomed. His rival Herod scorned, and sent him back in purple robes adorned. The implacable now far more fiercely bent to prosecute the twice found innocent, perhaps lest they their own should lose, unless they him of forged guilt accuse. But when revenge doth once the mind engage, Oh, how it raves! Lost to all sense but rage, no lioness, late of her whelps bereft, with wilder fury prosecutes the theft. Oh, shame! I, through fear, I sought to shield the right with honest fraud, and justice steal my sight. As when the labouring bark, too weak to stem the boisterous tide, obliquely cuts the stream, they have an ancient custom, if we may believe the Jews, derived from that day when the delivered sons of Israel fled from those banks whose floods in summer swell, that ever when the vernal moon shall join her silver orb and in full lustre shine, they should on someone release to gratify the people by their law condemned to die. Now, hoping to have freed the innocent, the violent priests my clemency prevent, who urge the heady vulgar to demand one Barabbas, a thief, who had a hand in every murder hot with human blood. How little it avails us to be good. Prosperous favour, though the hate they hear, his guiltless soul their votes the guilty clear. And now my wife's not idle dreams perplex my struggling thoughts, which all this night did vex her troubled slumbers, who conjures me by all that is holy, all the gods, that I should not the laws of justice violate to gratify so undeserved a hate. For this shall I, the Hebrew fathers, slight, the endeavours of a nation so unite, committed to my charge? Shall I, for one poor abject, forfeit all the good I have done? These pestered walls all jury now enfold, the houses hardly can their strangers hold, sent from all parts to this great festival. What if the vulgar to their weapons fall? Who knows the end, if once the storm begin? Sure I, their judge, egregious praise should win by troubling of the public peace. Shall I, then, render him to death? Impiety! For what offence? Is his offence not great, whose innovation may a war beget? Lest empire suffer, they whose sceptres bear oft make a crime and punish what they fear. One hope remains. Our soldiers the freeborn, and yet by our command, with whips have torn. A sight so full of pity may assuage the swiftly spreading fire of popular rage. Look on this spectacle. His arms, all o'er with lashes galled, deep dyed in their own gore, his sides exhausted, all the rest appears like the fictitious scarlet which he wears. And for a crown, the wreathed thorns enfold his bleeding brows with grief. His grief behold!
Away with him! From this contagion free the infected earth, and nail him to a tree.
What? Crucify your king?
Dominion can no rival brook. His rule, a law to man whom Rome adores, we readily obey, and will admit of none but Caesar's sway. He Caesar's right usurps. He hopes to ascend the Hebrew throne. Thy own affairs intend. Dost thou discharge thy master's trust, if in thy government a precedent begin, so full of danger, tending to the rape of majesty? Shall treason thus escape?
The tumult swells, the vulgar and the great join in their votes with contributed heat, whose whispering such a change of murmur raise, as when the rising wind's first fury strays 'mong wave-beat rocks, when gathering clouds deform the face of heaven, whose wrath begets a storm. The fearful Pilate then distrusts the skies, and to the nearest port for refuge flies. To these rude clamours they mine ears inure. Such sharp diseases crave a sudden cure. You, my attendants, hither quickly bring spot-purging water from the living spring. Thou liquid crystal from pollution clear, and you, my innocent hands, like record bear, on whom these cleansing streams so purely run, I voluntarily have nothing done, nor am I guilty, though he guiltless die. Yours is the crime, his blood upon you lie.
Rest thou secure. If his destruction shall draw down celestial vengeance, let it fall. Thick on our heads in punishment renew, and ever our dispersed race pursue.
Then I, from this tribunal mounted on embellished marble judgment's awful throne, thus censure, lead him to the cross, and by a servile death let Judas king there die. And with that problematic moment, we move into Act 3, Scene 3, enter chorus of Jewish women and Jesus.
We deplore thy miseries, for thee we beat our breasts, our eyes in bitter tears their moisture shed. If thou be he, by ravens fed, aloft on flaming chariots borne, yet wouldst to cruel lords return, or that sad bard believed too late, who sung his country's servile fate, now come to sigh her destiny, alike unhappy, twice to die. Or he, long nourished in the wood, who late in Jordan's cleansing flood so many washed, that durst reprove a king for his incestuous love, slain for a dancer. If the same, or other of an elder fame, sent back to earth, in vices drowned, to raise it from the dark profound, 'tis sure thy sanctity exceeds, blazed by thy virtue and thy deeds. O nevermore, ringed with a throng of followers, shall thy sacred tongue inform our actions, nor the way to heaven and heavenly joys display. The blind, who now the unknown light beholds, scarce trusting his own sight, thy gift, shall not the giver see. Those maladies, subdued by thee with powerful art and herbs defy, no more thy sovereign touch shall fly. Nor loaves so tacitly increased, again so many thousands feast. Thou, rule of life's perfection, by practice as by precept shown, late hemmed with auditors, whose store encumbered the too narrow shore, the mountains covered with their press, the mountains then their people less, for whom our youth their garments strew, victorious bows before thee through, while thou in triumph ridest along, saluted with a joyful song. Now see what change from fortune springs, O dire vicissitude of things, betrayed, abandoned by thine own, dragged by thy foes, opposed by none. Thou hope of our afflicted state, thou balm of life and lord of fate, not erst to such unworthy bands didst thou submit thy powerful hands. Lo, he who gave the dumb a tongue with patient silence bears his wrong. The soldier renews his blows, the whip new opened furrows shows, which now in angry tumors swell. To us their wrath the Romans sell. Lo, how his members flow, the smart confined to no particular part. His stripes, which make us all but one sore, run in confused streams of gore. Art thou the slave of thy own fate, to bear thy torments' cursed weight? What Arab, though he wildly stray in wandering tents and live by prey, or Cyclop, who no pity knows, would such a cruel task impose? Oh, that the fatal pressure might sink thee to earth, nor weigh more light than death upon thee, that thy weak untwisted thread of life might break. It were a blessing so to die. But oh, for how great cruelty art thou reserved. The cross thou now supportst must with thy burden bow.
Daughters of Selima, no more my wrongs thus passionately deplore. These tears for future sorrows keep, wise for yourselves and children weep. That horrid day will shortly come, when you shall bless the barren womb, and breast that never infant fed. Then shall you wish the mountain's head would from his trembling basis slide, and all in tombs of ruins hide.
Alas, thou spotless sacrifice to greedy death, no more our eyes shall see thy face. Ah, nevermore shalt thou return from death's dark shore, though Lazarus, late of thy call, break through the bars of funeral, raised from that prison to review the world, which then he hardly knew, who forthwith former sense regains, the blood sprang in his heated veins, his sinews supple grew, yet were again almost congealed with fear. Thy follower, Sadoc, now may know their error from the shades below. A few beloved by Most High, though virtue of the deity, to others rarely rendered breath, none ever raised himself from death.
And we go into Act 4, Scene 1. We have first Nuncius, we have chorus of Jewish women, and we have the second Nuncius.
I, from the horridest act that ever fed the fire of barbarous rage, at length am fled, yet oh, too near the object still pursues, floats in mine eyes, that sad scene renews.
Art thou a witness of his misery? Saw'st thou the Galilean prophet die?
Those savages to Scythian rocks confined, who knew no God, nor virtue of the mind, but only sense pursue, who hunger tame with slaughtered lives, they and their food the same, would this detest.
Feign innocence, would none lend him a tear, were all transformed to stone?
No, certainly, yet so commiserate, as pity proved more tyrannous than hate, the cursed tree with too much weight oppressed his stooping shoulders. Death had now released his fainting soul, but oh, the lenity of malice would not suffer him to die. Part of the load imposed with idle scorn on Libyan Simon, in Cyrene born, to whom the affected quiet of the fields, secured by poverty, no safety yields. The furies of the city him surprise, who from the vices of the city flies, who bears not his own burden, that none may misdoubt the innocent became their prey.
Forthwith unmask this wretched face of woe, all that he suffered and the manner show. What words break from his sorrow? Give thy tongue a liberal scope. Our minds not seldom long to know what they abhor, nor spare our ears. What can be heard is fancied by our fears.
Without the city, on that side which lies exposed to the boisterous injuries of the cold north, to war a fatal way, infamous by our slaughters, Golgotha exalts his rock. No flowers there paint the field, nor flourishing trees refreshing shadows yield. The ground all white with bones of mortals spread, stenched with the putrefaction of the dead, and relics of unburied carcasses, who on his aged father's throat durst seize, rip up his mother's womb, who poison dressed for his own brother, or his unknown guest betrayed, and gave his mangled flesh for food unto the wild inhabitants of the wood. This stage of death deserved, while every soul misdeed of theirs pursues the guilty soul. Now, when the Nazarite at his dismal place arrived, with a weak and tardy pace, lest he should die too quickly, some prefer sweet wine mixed with the bitter tears of myrrh. He of the idle present hardly tastes, but to encounter with his torments hastes. The steel now bored his feet, whose slit veins spout like pierced conduits, both his arms stretched out, his hands fixed with two nails, while his great soul these tortures suffered, while the rising bowl forsook the earth, and crimson torrents sprung from his fresh wounds. He gave his grief no tongue. The cross advanced and fixed, then, as more nigh to his own heaven, his eye bent on the sky. Among such never to be equalled woes, who would believe it, pities his stern foes, and thinks those false contrivers, those who gored his flesh with wounds more fit to be deplored, who even their merited destruction fears, and falsely judged, the truly guilty clears. Father, he cries, forgive this sin. They knew not what they did, nor know what now they do. Meanwhile, the soldiers who in blood delight, with hearts more hard than rocks, behold this sight, and savage rigour never reconciled to pity, all humanity exiled, who, used to pillage, now intend their prey, nor for his death, though then a dying, stay. Yet he, alive and looking on, divide the spoil, yet more in the spectator joyed. Fury in trifles sports, their scorn his poor, yet parted garments distribute to four. His inward robe with one contexture knit, nor of the like division would admit. Their votes to the dispose of lots refer, electing chance for their blind arbiter. Nor was it the least of evils to behold the ignoble partners of his pain, who old in mischief robbed the murdered passengers, followed by troops that filled the night with fears. While thus they hung, none could the doubt explain whether he more had saved than they had slain. The numerous index of each bloody deed now brand their lives, when those who could not read at such a distance of the next inquire for what they died, who had the same desire, but above his declining head they hung. A table in 3 languages, the tongue, the first of tongues, which taught our Abrahamites those heavenly precepts and mysterious rites. Next, that to which the informed world imparts, the Grecian industry and learned arts. Then this, from whence the conquered earth now takes her laws, and at the Roman virtue quakes, all of one sense. His place of birth, his name declare, and for the Hebrew king proclaim. After the bloody priests so long had fed on this loved spectacle, at length they read the title, and in such misery, so full of ruth, found something to envy. The governor, entreating to take down that glorious style, lest he the Hebrew crown should vindicate in death, and so deny that princes by subordinates should die. But who that day so readily complied to give his life, austerely this denied?
Why, while lingering death his sad release deferred, how looked the standers by? What words were heard?
Not all alike, discording murmurs rise, some with transfixed fixed hearts and wounded eyes, astonished stand, some joy in his slow fate, and to the last extend their barbarous hate. Motion itself variety begets, and by a strange vicissitude regrets what it effected, nor one posture bears. Tears scornful, laughter raise, and laughter tears. He to the temple from the impoverished shore of Galilee his followed steps adore, and ministered to his life. Now of his end the witnesses, still to their dying friend their faith preserve, which as they could, they show in all the expressions of a perfect woe. One from her panting breast her garments tear, another the bright tresses of her hair. This with her naked arms her bosom beats, the hollow rock her fearful shrieks repeat. She stiff with sorrow, but what grief could vie with that example of all piety, his virgin mothers. This affords no way to lessening tears, nor could itself display. Where should she fix her looks, if on the ground she sees that with her blood he bleeding drowned? Or if she raise her eyes, the killing sight of her womb's tortured issue quenched their light. Fearing to look on either, both disclose their terrors, who now licenses her woes. Ready to have stepped forward and embraced the bloody cross, her feeble limbs stuck fast, her feet their motion lost, her voice in vain a passage sought, such grief could not complain, whose soul almost as great as a sorrow stung, as his who on the tree in torments hung. That youth, one of the 12, so dignified by his dear master's love, stood by her side, beholding this sad pair, whose souls that were to him then life, while life remained more dear. He found another cross, his spirits melt more for the sorrow seen than torments felt. At length, in strength transcending either, break the bars of his long silence, and thus spake, "A legacy to each of you I leave. Mother, this son instead of me receive, and by thy adoption, and thou, gentle boy, the seed of Zebedeus, late my joy, thy friend now for thy mother take. This said, again he to his torments bowed his head. The vulgar with the elders of our race and soldiers shake their heads in his disgrace. Is this the man, said they, whose hands can raise the temple and rebuild it in 3 days? Now show thy strength. Or if the thunderer above the rank of mortals thee prefer, acknowledge for his heir, let him descend, confirm thy hopes, and timely succour lend. Behold, the help thou gavest to others fails the author. Break these bonds, these stubborn nails, and from the cross descend. Then we will say thou art king, and thy commands obey. Nor was it enough that the surrounding throng wound with reproaches, who besides him hung, doth now again a murderer's mind disclose, and in his punishment more wicked grows. Who thus, if thou be he whom God did choose to govern the freed nation of the Jews, thyself and us release, thus honour win, the partner of his death, as of his sin, who had his fierceness with the thief cast off, ill brooks, and thus reprove that impious scoff. Hast thou as yet not learnt to acknowledge God, nor sacred justice fear, who now the rod of vengeance feelst? Wilt thou again offend, and to the jaws of hell thy guilt extend? This death we owe to our impiety. But what are his misdeeds? Why should he die? Then looking on his face with dropping eyes, forgive me, oh forgive a wretch, he cries, and oh my Lord, my King, when thou shalt be restored to thine own heaven, remember me. He mildly gives consent, and from the bars of that sad cross, thus raised him to the stars. With me, a happy guest, thou shalt enjoy those sacred orchards where no frosts destroy the eternal spring, before the morn display the purple ensign of the ensuing day.
What's this? The center pants with sudden throes, and trembling earth a sad distemper shows. The sun, affrighted, hides his golden head, from hence by an unknown ecliptic fled. Irregular heavens abortive shades display, and night usurps the empty throne of day. What threats do these dire prodigies portend to our offending race? Those ills transcend all that can be imagined, which enforce disturbed nature to forget her course. I hear approaching feet. Whate'er thou art, whom darkness from our sight conceals, impart all that thou knowest to our prepared ears. Accomplish or dissolve our pressing fears.
Fury from which, if loose, the earth hath fled, and fatal stars of their event, he's dead.
O heaven, we pardon now day's hasty flight, nor will complain, since they have quenched this light. Yet tell how he disposed of his last breath, the passage and the order of his death.
As the declining sun the shades increased, reflecting on the more removed east, his blazing hair grew black. No clouds obscures his vanished light, thus this his own orb immures. The day's fourth part as yet invests the pole. Were this a day when from the afflicted soul this voice was clearly heard, not like the breath of those who labor between life and death. My God, oh, why dost thy own forsake, for which purposely the multitude mistake, but to prolong their cruel mirth, who said, he on the Thespian prophet calls for aid, now to return and draw from heaven again devouring showers of fire or floods of rain. With silence this he endures. His body rent, his blood exhausted, and his spirit spent, he cried, I thirst. As servants to his will, the greedy hollows of the sponge they fill with vinegar, which hyssop sprigs combine, and on a reed exalt the deadly wine. Wine or vine? Anyway, this scarcely tasted, his pale lips once more opened, and now louder than before cried, all is finished, here my labors end. To thee, O Father, Heavenly Father, I commend my parting soul. This said, hung down his head, and with his words his mixed spirits fled, leaving his body, which again must bleed, now senseless of the cross, from which prison freed, those happy seats he enjoys, by God assigned to injured virtue and ethereal mind, but terrors which with nature war affright our peaceless souls. The world hath lost its light. Heaven and the deeps below our guilt pursue. Pale troops of wandering ghosts now hurry through the holy city, whom from her unknown and secret womb the trembling earth hath thrown. The cleaving rocks their horrid jaws display, and yawning tombs afford the dead a way to those that live. Heaven is the general and undistinguished sepulchre to all. Old chaos now returns, ambitious night, impatient of alternate rule or right, such as before the day's eternal ethereal birth, with her own shady people fills the earth.
How did the many-minded people look at these portents? With what affection strook?
The lamentations mixed with the cries of weeping women in loud volleys rise. Those who had known him, who his followers were, while yet he lived, and did in death adhere to that new night, sighs from their sorrows send, and to those heavens they could not see extend their pious hands, complaining that the sun would then appear when this was to be done. The safety of their lives the vulgar dread. Some for themselves lament, some for the dead. Others the ruin of the world bewail. Their courages the cruel Romans fail. Those hands which knew no peace now lazy grew, and conquering fear to earth their weapons threw. The amazed centurion with our thoughts complied, and swore the heroes most unjustly died, whose punishment the earth could hardly brook, but groaning with the horrid motion shook, confirmed by the day's prodigious flight to be a beam of the celestial light. And so the morning heaven's inverted face shows to the underworld his heavenly race.
Why flock the people to the temple thus? No cause excepting piety in us can want belief. Hope they to satisfy with sacrifice the wrath of the Most High.
New prodigies as horrid did there hail thus the astonished multitude. The temple's veil that hung on gilded beams and purple dyed, asunder rent and fell on either side. The trust of what was sacred is betrayed, and all the Hebrew mysteries displayed. That fatal ark, so terrible of old to our pale foes, which cherubims of gold veiled with their hovering wings, whose closure held those two-leaved tables, wherein God revealed his sacred laws. That food which by a new example fell from heaven in fruitful dew about our tents, and tacitly expressed by intermittent showers the seventh day's rest. The rod with never dying blossoms spread, with the mitre honor Aaron's head. Yeah, these with dull temple perished. The eye could reach no object in this rupture, but the breach. What was from former ages hid is shown, which struck so great a reverence when unknown. The temple shines with flames, and to the sight that feared recess, disclosed with its own light, either religion from their fury flies, leaving it naked to profaner eyes, or God doth this abhorred seat reject, and will his temple in the mind erect.
Shall punishment in death yet find an end? Shall his cold corpse to earth in peace descend? Or naked hang with so dire a sight, profane the vesper of the sacred night?
Too late religion warms their savage breasts, Too late religion warms their savage breasts, lest that near hour which harbingers their feast should take them unprepared. To Pilate they repair, entreat him that the soldier may from bloody crosses take their bodies down, before their festivals the mourning crown, that no uncleanness might from thence arise in memory of the Egyptian sacrifice. The legs of the two thieves they break, whose breath yet groaned between the bounds of life and death. The crashing bones report a dreadful sound, while both their souls at once a passage found. Nor had the cohort less to Jesus done, who by the course prescribed by fate had run. But dead deep in his side, his trembling spear a soldier strake, his entrails bare appear. And from that wide-mouthed orifice a flood of water gushed, mixed with a stream of blood. The crosses now discharged their fraught. The people fled, not with one look or thought, part sad, part amazed, spent fury eyes. Whither so fast? Run you to sacrifice a silly lamb? Too mean an offering is this for you, who have sacrificed your king.
Either deceived by the ambiguous day, or troops of mourners to my eyes display a perfect sorrow. Women with their bare and bleeding breasts, drowned cheeks, disheveled hair. The soldiers slowly march, with knees that bend beneath their fears, and Pilate's stairs ascend. Do we have a chorus of Roman soldiers?
Yes, that we do. Alan.
Oh, sorry. O thou who on the flaming chariot ridest, and with the perpetual motion time dividest, great king of day, from whose far darting eye night wandering stars with fainting splendor fly, whither, thus intercepted, dost thou stray, through what an unknown darkness lies their way? In heaven, what new not born night the day invades? The mariner that sails by Tyrian gades, as yet sees not thy panting horses steep their fiery fetlocks in the Hesperian deep. No pitchy storm, wrapped up in swelling clouds, by earth exhaled thy golden tresses shrouds, nor thy pale sister in thy wandering race, with interposed wheels obscures thy face, but now far off retires with her stolen light, till in a silver orb her horns unite. Hath some Thessalian witch with charms unknown surprised and bound thee? What new Phaeton with his feeble hands to guide thy chariot strives, far from the deserted zodiac drives? Horrid fact, before the approach of night, deservedly deprives the world of light. As when stern Atreus to his brother gave his children's flesh, who made his own their grave, or when the vestal Ilia's godlike son, who our unbounded monarchy begun, was in 100 pieces cut by theft at once of life and funerals bereft. Or hath that day wherein the gods were born finished the course of heaven in its return, and now the aged stars refuse to run beyond that place from whence they first begun? Nature, what plagues dost thou to thine intend? Whither shrinks this huge mass? What fatal end? If now the general flood again retire, if the world perish by licentious fire, what shall those of those devouring seas become? Where shall those funeral ashes find a tomb? Whatever innovates the course of things, to men alone, nor nations ruin brings. Either the groaning world's disordered frame now suffers, or that power which guides the same. Do proud Titanians with their impious war again provide the Olympian thunderer? Is there a mischief extant greater than our Python, or the snake of Lemur's fen, that poisons the pure heavens with viperous breath? What god, from gods derived, oppressed by death, is now in his own heaven bewailed? Divine, Laius gave to man this precious wine. Not Hercules so many monsters slew, unborn Apollo less in physic knew. Sure, we with darkness are enveloped, because that hateless innocent blood by envy shed, so dear unto the gods, this place defamed, which shook the earth, made the day ashamed. Great Father of us all, whose influence informs the world thou madest, though sin incense thy just displeasure, easy to forgive those who confess and for their vices grieve. Now to the desperate sons of men who stray in sin's dark labyrinth, restore the day. One sacrifice seek we to expiate all our offences and appease his hate, which the religion of the Samian nor Thracian heart, wild beasts instructing can, nor that prophetic boy, the Glebe's smart son, who taught the Tuscans divination. The blood which from that mangled body bled must purge our sins, which we unjustly shed. O smooth thy brows, receive the innocence of one for all, and with our guilt dispense for sin. What greater ransom can we pay? What worthier offering on that altar lay?
And we go into Act 5, Scene 1. Enter Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus.
See, citizens, we Pilate's bounty bear. Without a suit men cannot man inter. The Roman progeny, nor freely will do what is good, nor unrewarded ill. Nothing is now in use but barbarous vice. They sell our blood, and on graves they set a price.
Oh, Joseph, these vain ecstasies refrain, but if it seems so pleasant to complain, let Rome alone and seek a nearer guilt. His blood not Romulus' sons, but Abraham's spilt. Whoso the purest sense sincerely draws from those celestial oracles and laws, by God above himself inspired, will say, none led to eternity a straight away. What's that to Pilate? Fell the innocent by a Roman oath? Wast through the subtlety of senators or priests the doom displayed? They Caesarless, then Caiaphas obeyed. Let us transfer the fact. The impious Jew with heart, with tongue and eyes, first Jesus slew. The Romans only acted their offence. Ah, well, the heavens with Hebrew hands dispense. For this the Jew the Italian's crime inveighed, and wished him the bloody homicide. Do we as yet our servitude lament, when such a murder meets no punishment? This they do, this command.
The progeny of Roman Ilia and of Sarah I with equal detestation execrate. Oh, may they perish by a fearful fate. Just heaven, why sleeps thy lightning? In a shower of pitch descend. Let stenching seas devour this cursed city. Sodom, thou art clear compared to ours. No more will I a tear shed for my country. Let the great in war, worse than the Babylonian conqueror, enter her breaches like a violent flood until the bloody city swim in blood. Is this too little? Let diseases sow their fruitful seed and in destruction grow. Famine in their dry entrails take thy seat. What nature most abhors, enforce to eat. Let the infant tremble at his father's knife. The babe re-enter her who gave it life. While yet the eager foe invests the wall within, may they by their own weapons fall. The temple wrapped in flames. Let the enemy decide their civil discord and destroy with fire and sword ungrateful Solima. The relics of their slaughter drive away, nor 70 years dissolve their servile bands. Despised and wretched wander through all lands, abolished be their law. All from the state, no day see their return. Let sudden fate succeed my curses. This infected soil no more shall feed me. What unusual toil shall my old feet refuse, so they no more tread on this earth? Though to that unknown shore, which lies beneath the slow boots wane dashed by the inconstant billows of that main, that country shall be mine, where justice sways, and bold integrity the truth obeys.
This error with a secret poison feeds the mind's disease. Who censures his own deeds? Who not another's? These accursing times rather the men condemn than tax their crimes. Such is the tyranny of judgment, prone to sentence all offences but our own. Because of late we cried not crucify, nor falsely doom the innocent to die, ourselves we please, as it a virtue were, and great one, if from great offences clear. Confess. What orator would plead his cause, to vindicate his truth, who urged the laws, or once accursed their bloody suffrages by envy signed? Who durst these lords displease? So piety suffered, while by speaking they, and we by silence, did the just betray. When women openly their zeal doth show, we, in acknowledging our master, slow, under the shady coverture of night, secured our fears which could not brook the light. Joseph at length our faith itself expressed, but to the dead.
This is a truth confessed. The evening now restored day subdues, and lo, the vigil with the night ensues. Not far from Golgotha, in famous rocks, a cave there is, hid with the shady locks of funeral cypress, hewn through living stone, the house of death, as yet possessed by none. My age this chose for her eternal rest, which now shall entertain a nobler guest. That ample stone which shuts the sepulchre shall the inscription of his virtues bear. Who knows but soon a holier age may come, when all the world shall celebrate this tomb, and kings, as in a temple here adore, through fire and sword, sought from the farthest shore.
Pure water of the spring, you precious tears, perfumes which odour-breathing summer bears, with your preservatives this body lay, sink through his pores, and from corruption save. Nor God, nor fate will suffer that this pure, this sacred corpse should more than death endure. Religion, if thou know'st the shades below, let never filthy putrefaction flow through his uncovered bones, nor waste of time resolve this heavenly figure into slime. Act 5, Scene 2, enter John and Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Thou reverend virgin of his royal blood, who all between the Erythraean flood and great Euphrates won by strenuous arms, assume his noble fortitude, those harms which press thy soul subdue. Ungentle fate hath, by undoing thee, secured thy state. Fortune her strength by her own blows hath spent. Judea's kingdom from thy fathers rent by foreign hands, of ancient wealth bereft. Except thy sons, what was for danger left? These storms by death dispersed serene appear, for what hath childless poverty to fear?
O John, for thee in such extremes to mourn perhaps is new, but I to grief was born. With this have we conserves twice 16 years. No form of sorrow hath beguiled our fears. To me how ominously the prophets sung, even from the time that heavenly infant sprung in my chaste womb. Old Simeon this revealed, and in my soul the deadly wound beheld, when one among so many infants slain was by the tyrant's weapon sought in vain. No miracles had then his fame displayed, or him the object of their envy made. Perfidious fraud in sanctity's disguise, nor the adulterated Pharisees by his detention had he yet inflamed, nor for despising of their rights defamed, a trumpet of intestine war. The earth of nothing then accused him but his birth. Not that fierce prince so cruel to his own, nor his successor in that fatal throne, as Haim Vice, who with the prophet's head supplied his feast, and on the blood he had shed, fed his incestuous eyes in dire delight to heighten impious love, could me affright, nor yet the vulgar hating his free tongue, and shower of stones by 1,000 furies flung. I, though no mischief could our steps pursue, that was more great, or to our suffering new. What's example, what no mother feared, this alone my dying hopes interred. Wretch, wilt thou seek for words to express thy woes? O this so vast a grief in silence close. Great God, such is my faith, why wouldst thou come to this inferior kingdom through my womb? Why madst thou choice of me to bring thee forth for punishment, unhappy in my worth? No woman ever bare a son by touch of man conceived, whose soul endures so much. No mother such an issue better gained, nor lost it worse, by cursed death profaned.
What louder grief with such an emphasis strikes through mine ears? What honoured course is this with Tyrian linen veiled? What's he whose hairs contend with snow, whose eyes look through their tears, who on those veins yet bleeding odors pours, or his assistant crowned with equal hours? What troops of women hither throng, what storms rise in their looks? Grief wanders through all forms. My eyes wound my heart. This was thy son, this is thy blood, thy mangled flesh. Oh, run, take thy last kisses, ere of those bereft. By funeral, what else of all is left?
My soul, tired with long misery, amidst these greater sorrows die, while grief at his sad exequies pours out her last complaints in these. Let me this snowy pall unfold, once more those quickening looks behold. O son, born to a sad event, thus to thy poor mother sent. O Salem, was thy hatred such to murder him who loved so much? Ah, see, his side gored with a spear, those hands that late so bounteous were, transfixed, his feet pierced with one wound. The son had better never found his loss, than with restored light to show the world so dire a sight. You neighbours to the sun's uprise, who read their motions in the skies, O you in chief who found your Lord, and with such lively zeal adored, now view the heavens' inverted laws, with me bewail the wretched cause. His birth a star, now kindled, signed, to see his death the sun grew blind. Thou hope of my afflicted state, thou living, I accuse not fate. The day again with light is crowned, but thou in night for ever drowned. Oh, couldst thou see my broken heart, the flowing tears whose springs impart thy mother, whom man never knew, who by the word then fate fruitful grew. My womb admired that unknown guest, whose burden for 9 moons increased. Thy mother to a sceptre born, with age and wrinkling sorrow worn. This country ceased to get her bread, with labour in an humble shed. Thy labour from these 2 fountains sprung, these arms about my neck have hung, couched on the flowery banks of Nile. Egypt, so just to thy exile, hath now redeemed her former curse. Our Jews than those of Memphis worse. If his chaste blood at length assuage the bitter tempest of your rage, if you can pity misery, O let me by your mercy die, or if not glutted with his blood, with mine increase his purple flood. O my dear son, what here our eyes behold, what yonder hung, or what death could enfold in endless night, is mine and only mine. No mortal did in thy conception join, nor part of thee can challenge. Since the loss was only ours, let us the grief engross, ungrateful man, who his protector slew, nor feels his curse, nor then his blessing knew. Poor wretch, no soul in thy defence durst rise, and now the murdered unrevenged lies. The lame, who by the powerful charms were made sound and swift-footed, ran not to thy aid. Those eyes which never saw the glorious light before thy sovereign touch avoid thy sight, and others from death's silent mansion, by thy virtue ravished, suffer thee to die.
Too true is thy complaint, too just thy woes. Such were his friend, from whom from a world he chose. O desperate faith, from whom are we thus fallen? Our souls from no defection free. Some sold forsworn, none from tainture clear. All from him fled to follow their own fear. Thou oracle, a father in thy care, in love a brother, the delinquent spare in thy divine affection, O too blessed, whom yesternight soul leaning on thy breast. If love in death survive, if yet as great, even by that love thy pardon I entreat, by this thy weeping mother, I the heir, by thee adopted to thy filial care, though alike wretched and as comfortless, yet as I can will comfort her distress. O Virgin Mother, favor thy relief, though just, yet moderate thy flowing grief. Like downcast mind by thy own virtue raised, the old prophets fill their volumes with thy praise. No age but shall through all the round of earth sing of that heavenly love and sacred birth. Sorry, that was a weird sentence. What female glory parallels thy worth? So grew a mother, such a son brought forth. She who proved fruitful in the extreme of age and found the truth of that despised presage. She whose sweet babe exposed among the reeds, with which ancient Nilus with his moisture feeds, who then, a smiling infant, overcame the threatening flood, aspired not to thy fame, but these expressions are for thee too low. The opening heavens did their observance show, those radiant troops which darkness put to flight. Thy throes is listed in that festive night, who over thy adored infant hung with golden wings and alleluias sung, while the old sky, to imitate that birth, bare a new star to amaze the wondering earth.
Sorrow, sorrow is fled, joy, a long banished guest, with heavenly rapture fills my enlarged breast, more great than that in youth, when from the sky an angel brought that blessed embassy, when shame, not soon instructed, blushed for fear, how I, a son, by such a fate could bear. I greater things foresee, my eyes behold that ever is by destiny enrolled. With troops of pious souls, more greater than they, thou to felicity shalt lead the way. A holy people shall obey thy throne, and heaven itself surrender thee thy own. Subjected death thy triumph now attends, while thou from thy demolished tomb ascends. Nor shalt thou long be seen by mortal eyes, but in perfection mount above the skies. propitious ever, from that height shall give peace to the world, instructed how to live. 1,000 languages shall thee adore, thy empire knows no bounds. The farthest shore, washed by the ocean, those whose days bright flame scarce warms, shall hear the thunder of thy name. Licentious sword, nor hostile fury shall prevail against thee, thou the Lord of all. Those tyrants whom the vanquished worlds obey, before thy feet shall Caesar's sceptre lay. The time draws on, in which itself must end, when thou shalt in a throne of clouds descend to judge the earth. In that reformed world, those by their sins infected shall be hurled down under one perpetual night, while they whom thou hast cleansed enjoy perpetual day.
And that is the end of that. So this is based on a whole line of narrative poems and things going on there. But the primary person this is translated from, Hugo Grotius, who's quite an important chap, actually. I just looked him up on Wikipedia. He's got he did loads of stuff. He was quite busy, he was. So this is, I have no idea how accurate a translation this is of his work, but was an important, quite an important person. So the version that this is translated from was from about 1608, so a little over 30 years later, this guy had a go. I say based on a whole descendant of other stuff, but we're not going to bother with those things because they're very old. We're just going to focus on this text and how it functions. So, yes, I see within this a thing. I don't see all of the thing. I think all of the thing is we've read it all now, and it was quite hard work. Now, even with good performers and you know, a lot of a good headwind, you know, behind you, it's a lot. But I think actually, when it comes to the major moments, when it really engages with telling a story, some of it's quite good. I think some of this works quite well, and I think if you found a nice church, some good readers, this would be, an interesting thing. It's not excessively long as a text as it stands, and once we've cut all the choruses out and then filleted back the excesses of the other characters, I despite the various problematic elements of bits of the narrative, which is basically the problematic elements of Christianity, the passion is not without its problems, especially if you're Jewish, and this text is full of all of those problems, and in fact it demonstrates really interestingly a shifting of concepts over time. Because, of course, it's much more interested in race. The word race turns up a lot in this text. So whereas when we're doing medieval things, they may be talking about the Jews, but they're talking about the Jews much more in terms of a practice. Whereas, but this end of the spectrum, it's much more a people. It's much more a race. It's moving into what the more modern conception of anti-Semitism. So this text is demonstrating that in really interesting ways, which is very interesting historically. It's not necessarily helpful for us to stage it because we need to make a decision as to what to do with that material. So on that said, history hat on, it's very interesting in the way these texts shift. There's so much more. I mean, when Nicodemus comes on and just goes, "Don't blame the Romans, it was all the Jews' fault," and you're sort of going, interesting. What that is doing. There's the usual problem, of course, when they're talking about, they were so cruel to Jesus when they put the vinegar in his mouth. It was so mocking. It was a painkiller. It was a nice thing to do. It was it's just terrible cruelty and mockery. No, it wasn't. It was standard practice. Anyway, Alan.
Yeah, one thing I found quite odd was there were a number of ones, particularly in that long Judas speech, which was really more based on Greco-Roman mythologies and pantheon than it was on any sort of Hebraic background. It came up again in the Roman soldiers, in which place it didn't worry me because that seemed consistent with characters. But
they're constantly talking about the Thunderer. They're constantly sort of referencing Jove and things like that. And
weird.
It is a weird. Yeah, it is genuinely weird, isn't it? Because you're right. It's not just the Romans doing it. Everybody's doing it, and it is strange. And a sort of an element of repetition. This text is very repetitious in some of the word choices it's using and phrasing and things. Lynn.
Yeah, the problematic attitude of this text toward Judaism is present in lots of obvious and some less obvious ways. I mean, the obvious, like even Peter talking about we're terrible people. But like the first chorus of Jewish women, like again, lots of classical references, Phoebus and stuff like that. Which I don't know how Romanized Jews living in the empire would have been, but it just seems sort of wrong. And they talk about we were in the temple all night waiting for the break of day. The day in Jewish practice begins at sunset, and it seems like the author is unaware of that. He's unaware of the fact that Passover begins in the evening. As do all days and holidays. So it's like something as fundamental as that, the author seems to be completely unaware of what it actually means to be a practicing Jew.
Yeah, and are we in any way surprised that? I mean, it's an interesting question. Textual transmission, is that coming from the earlier versions of this, or is that coming from the ignorance of this author in their translation and version of it? I don't know how different the two versions are, or the earlier versions. So it's an interesting question. Is that just straightforward? Because at this point, there's just about a small foothold of Jewish people in England at this. Just about, I think we're in that point where officially people are noticing that Jews are actually in the country, and it's something that becomes more apparent during or after the Civil War. So it's an interesting question how much anyone in England actually knows. Not a lot. But I suspect, depending on things. Alan?
Yeah, I think, in fact, following on what I was saying earlier, that at this time, the sort of the upper middle classes, who this, I think, originates from and for whom it was for, would have been steeped in classical rather than anything else. So their knowledge of Judaism would have been pretty minimal. But it's also interesting in as much as this is some 30 years after the issue of the authorized version, by which point the biblical texts that were in standard parlance in Britain would have been fairly standard.
Yes, it is interesting that using quite some of the more obscure word name choices and translation choices of certain peoples and things, which is something you associate with earlier Reformation texts. It's like some of the choices that Bale uses and things like that, rather than from this point of the spectrum. I mean, classical allusions don't necessarily have anything to do with class. They're steeped in the culture. But certainly the audience for this as a book is most likely to be, for the reading populace, though not necessarily the writing populace. There is a difference. But then we look back at N Town. We look back at the earlier mystery plays. They haven't got a clue how Judaism works at all. You've got these very weird Jewish customs that are weird mishmashes of Christian customs and all the rest of it. So it's interesting a contrast of something that's hundreds of years in between. Anyway,
but this is what 150 years after the main mystery cycles.
Oh yeah, it's well, I mean, depending on your point of view, some of them are still lingering 50 years prior to this, just about in some places. But broadly speaking, yeah, they've been gone for 100 years for most people. Their forms do survive in places. Anyway, I'll close the session here. Any final thoughts anyone wants to throw in? Wave. I think we possibly have a general sense of it, but very briefly, anyone got any thoughts? Eric, were you waving, or are you just scratching your head?
No, I was waving, but also scratching my head. But yeah, multitasking. I was just thinking that it's an interesting text because it's got like all these elements that are sort of very, the classical Greek thing of like, oh yes, this is a tragedy. Maybe not in that voice, but but it's also got the sort of more grounded elements of emotion, as you pointed out, where you've got stuff like the whole John Mary scene is actually quite like, I mean, okay, she switches quite quickly at the end of like, sorrow is fled, joy, so on and so forth. But I feel like it's doing something very interesting that could be mined for, like after you cut things like that are setting up stuff to explain things that the audience wouldn't know or the audience might know. I don't know. Then I feel like you would be left with something very intense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and it does. It is playable. I mean, it's just so damn repetitive. That is its problem, and it's breaking up the repetition. And then you can use the emotion to drive through, and also just narrative. When it drifts away from narrative that. You just go, I have no idea what the chorus is saying. Though there was a chorus in the middle I quite liked. The chorus start engaging actually on actual things happening rather than just talking about abstract concepts. And I sort of went, a bit more with the chorus now. Just ever so slightly. Act 3 wasn't too bad. Lynn, did you want to throw anything in?
Just briefly, I think it's worth noticing that in the exchange with Pontius Pilate, the Jews, presumably the men say, string him up, we have no king but Caesar. And the chorus of Jewish women is very compassionate. They're definitely on Jesus' side. So that's interesting how the Jewish population in this conception of those events is divided by gender. I don't know what to make of that. Just something to notice.
Yeah, especially as that's orbiting that really problematic moment of put all the sins on us moment, which is what has killed quite a lot of people in history, and has been the major motivator of it's one of those things of going, yes, it is a dramatically interesting moment, but it's also
yikes.
Yeah. Welcome to the early modern. There's a lot more I think to discuss on this and look at this in the future. I think it's historically very interesting. I think it, with adaptation, has some potential, and we may indeed return to it in the future, but not, I'm sure, for a little while. All that remains is to thank all the wonderful readers. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.